Welcome everybody to a very important broadcast. This one, another week, August 5th through August 11th, we're going to nail down the various influences that are affecting all of us and how best to use that energy. We have several ways of ascertaining this. We use two forms of astrology. We use the Rave Mandala from Human Design. I'm not really integrating that as much as I want to yet, but that's coming down the road. And we also use the I-Ching and collective dreams. This is the summary slide that we normally use. The purple arrow is the astrology. We triangulate, and so we have quite a bit of overlap this week. The DreamBot and the I-Ching doesn't particularly overlap a whole lot, but there is some overlap. I got to tell you that the astrology is seeping through in both the I-Ching and the DreamBot, but more metaphorically. And we're going to go through all this so that you don't have to be confused about my overview here. In astrology, there are quite a few aspects here, but the main ones are all related to Jupiter, the Sun, the Venus, Moon, and it's asking us to get deeper wisdom from our experiences. Ultimately, that's what the triangulation looks like. The Leo influence is much more action-packed, and that's showing up in the DreamBot. But remember last week, the DreamBot, or the collective unconscious, the solution was not giving into this need for control. Well, it's still showing up in the collective unconscious as we want to be in control. There's a lot of order and a lot of chaos. There's the Leo influence, which is action-packed, and that's also in the DreamBot. We'll cover all that. And then the I-Ching, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. The next slide, we're going to be talking about the I-Ching, and that's directly related to the Jupiter aspects because it's called the Great Accumulating with a single change line. So there is some differences, but the solution is very connected to the original hexagram, I-Ching 26, which I'm going to cover now. All right, so when we toss the coins when we cast the coins for the I-Ching, we do this with the intention of getting the biggest influence that is the highest probable influence that most people can feel in the world, in the collective. And then if there is a second hexagram, which if you have a little dot here, that means that it was a 9 in the casting coins, which means that this line has to be changed, and thus there's a second hexagram. That second hexagram is going to represent the solution. That's how we put those intentions out. And we have heaven on the bottom, in this case, 26, and we have the mountain above. And now the mountain won't change because there's no change lines, but the bottom will. The bottom will change into a lake. Well, anyway, the 26 hexagram is the taming of the power of the great, the maximization of power of memory applied to the nurturing of continuity. There's some key words here that I want you to pull out of here. The maximization, that's very Jupiter. Jupiter's, about excess, abundance, but also deeper wisdom. And the power of memory, there's a lot of Mercury in here. And then the power of nurturing, which is all about Cancer. It's all very related, and it's going to come back, I promise you, when we get into the astrology. Let's talk about the change line, which is the third line here. And it means, this is out of the Rave Mandala book, which I'm going to read a little bit more, but it says it's change line 3 is about influence, the ability once prepared to gather support. Now with a lot of planets in Leo, we are wanting to have public support. We are less afraid to be out in public and doing our influence. But let me talk a little bit more about the line 3. The authority to focus communal support, the power of the ego to gather support. Now, the ego in terms of astrology is the sun, and that's in Leo. So this is a very sun in Leo hexagram. Now, when Saturn is in detriment, now Saturn is not in detriment. Saturn is in his home of Capricorn, but it is in retrograde. So it is kind of a disregard, not kind of, it's not in detriment, but it is in retrograde. And so the leadership, while gathering support, will underestimate potential challenges. The egoist, unable to recognize the potential challenge in others. And so as you're gaining support, if you're under this influence, you probably, or they're warning you that you're going to be forgetting about some of the challenges inherent in this and just concerned about, hey, do people like me? And this is the influence. Remember, the taming of the power of the great. We are going to be taming the basically the Leo energy. That's in a nutshell. And so now, before we get into the astrology, let's talk about the dream bot. This is our collective dreams. And with the two words up here at the top, wounded and blood, it looked like it was going to be a bloodbath meme, but there's nothing else that is really, bad or negative or horrendous. But there's action packed. So it's almost like a computer game or just action. So looking for action, car, boat, wounded, blood, climb, dress, going, story, text, even shop. There's action. It's all action packed. And but then the other one is kind of the opposite, which is just order in the kingdom. It's not really opposite per se, but it's like, which one do you want? Do you want a lot of fun, or do you want everything to be reliable, and do you want to have control over everything? And that's the continuum that the collective unconscious is currently seeking, either control or fun. And the fun is clearly the Leo influence. The order is still left over from last week, but there are still some more Saturn influences this week, which, good segue, let's talk about the astrology. Now, I want to point out, as I get the pointer out so that I can focus in, I want to point out this. I want to include more of the Rave Mandala. I just don't have time to do that yet, but I have full intention on doing that. I thought it was really interesting to do this time. This is the hexagram. This was from the I-Ching reading 26. And I show this up here because it's very close to Jupiter. And Jupiter is where you're going to see all the action is in this week's planetary influences. But on Monday, what we're seeing is a couple of sextiles. These are moon, and in the moon aspects, normally I'm making these gray and thin because the moon whips around here pretty fast. And so these are kind of fleeting influences, and you can see it's all over the place. There's a square up to Saturn. Well, there's the order. Emotionally, the moon wants to have order, and the way it always is. And I don't want any change or anything like that. That would be devastating. We also have a square over to sextile over to the sun and Venus. I don't want to go through all these. That's going to get really cumbersome. But the moon being your emotional body, it's going to be all over the place. And then there's a little bit of leftover from Mercury opposed Pluto. And this is the last I'm going to say of it. And this, of course, this is not the moon, but I put in it as a gray line because it's on its way out. It's in a loose orb right now. And, but that influence still is there. And especially with the Mercury side of things, that influence is still there. Thinking about, having the need to balance the hidden power, the need for transformation and deep interchange, and all that. So that's definitely a factor in this overall theme. All right, let's go into Tuesday. So basically for Monday, it's emotional growth. You're just going to be, as you can see with the solution for, okay, when we get into the very end of this broadcast, we're going to transition into the solution. And when we talk about the solution, you're going to see why all these emotions from the moon are very important. And I'm going to tell you what to do with these emotions and how they're going to progress you into the future. On Tuesday, we are probably becoming more aware of our emotional differences. If Uranus is all about uniqueness and emotions in the moon, and then thoughts. This is a square over to Mercury. And so, squares produce a little bit of conflict, and they kind of feel like Saturn and want that order again, making order out of chaos, basically with the thoughts. But there's just some more emotional learning there on Tuesday. But Wednesday is where we really start to feel the vibe. And this one is with Jupiter, Trine, Sun. Now, of course, the Sun and Venus are within 2 degrees of each other, getting closer all the while. Next week, they'll actually be going exact, conjunct. So, but basically they are conjunct right now, and both of them will get the trine. Venus will have her trine tomorrow on Thursday. So in essence, we have the Sun and the Venus together holding hands in a trine over to Jupiter. So let's break this down. We've got the Sun, which represents our ego, basic character, and the Sun is obviously in Leo. So I'm a little bit more apt to need recognition, and I'm more prideful. It doesn't have to be a negative thing, but obviously if you go too extreme on that, it could be negative. But the Jupiter influence is very abundant and very can be excessive. However, Jupiter is in its home of Sagittarius, and they're both very much like deeper wisdom, maybe long distance travel, maybe deep religion. If Mercury and Gemini are the lower mind and the rational and all that, Jupiter and Sagittarius are much more of the higher transcendent mind. So this is where ego can get a very deep look into its own character, especially on Wednesday. But there's going to have a relationship flavor to it. So it might be where you are in your relationship, or maybe relationship with yourself, harmony with yourself. That can be but this is a trine. And so everything is very easy to get that wisdom that we need for going forward. Again, we're going to get into the details of how to do this later, but I want you to see when and where and why this energy arises. Now, all this is happening while the moon starts making even more aspects. And one of those is a sextile over to Saturn, a little bit more control, but there's a growth opportunity over here with these sextiles. There is a aspect over to the Sun and Venus as well. But just a lot of emotions. Okay, so I want you to remember 2 main things for Wednesday. On Wednesday is when the Sun trines Jupiter, and that's the main influence. But meanwhile, the Sun, you're going to get 2 aspects to the left, 2 aspects to the right. And it's not all at the same time, but throughout the day. So your emotions are going to be all over the place. Okay, so emotionally chaotic, we're going to cover what to do with those emotions. Okay, I hate to keep putting that off, but that's the way it is now. So on Thursday, now we get deeper wisdom, Jupiter, trine with relationships, a direct. It's 2:37 p.m. But again, Venus is conjunct with Sun. So your identity and basic character still are in play here. And it's like Jupiter is trine with whatever energetic expression is by those 2 planets together. even though it's just a direct aspect to Venus. But Venus being harmony, beauty, seeing the beauty in others, being beautiful, that kind of thing, and very harmonious with close relationships. And so you're going to get some deeper wisdom, Jupiter, with those relationships. And with the sun there, it's maybe public display of these relationships, or maybe needing recognition for your relationships. This really goes into the I-Ching reading of 26 and gaining support, because support's over here with the Venus. The sun is your ego. Ego needs support. It's in Leo. So Leo is outward and expressive and very public. All right. And then we have the I-Ching reading is referencing mind. And so Mercury is there, and that's in a trine as well. So that's very easy to think about your emotions, easy to think about that deeper wisdom that Jupiter is offering. All right, now we get into Friday, and now this whole Jupiter theme actually continues. It's not over, because the moon, when it makes a conjunction or very close to the conjunction of Jupiter, the moon makes a trine over to, Venus and the sun. And so we're highlighting this energy again. So here we are on Friday. This is 3 days in a row where we're getting deeper wisdom. In this case, the emotions are embedded in it. And so instead of being emotionally chaotic, there's a lot of emotional knowing. As you can see, there's no other moon aspects in the chart on Friday. And so the emotions are left to just consume and soak up inner wisdom. And I firmly believe that if we have the right orientation to emotions, those will provide us with some deep insights automatically, but especially this week. Emotional integration into all that deeper wisdom from earlier in the week. And so this is kind of the summary. As the moon makes its conjunction to Jupiter, it's like all of the learning gets flooded back into you. Now, when we talk about dreams, they have a very strong emotional origination, if you will. Basically, the experiences in your life, the ones that are the most emotional, tend to get the metaphoric or direct inferences in your dreams. And some people postulate that this is a survival mechanism. So we think that because it's the most emotional, our body tends to think that it's the most important for survival. So it dreams about it in order to get all that information in the long-term memory bank so that we can access that learning later. So these dreams on Friday are going to be really critical for you, especially Friday night. So if you want to count on a day to get some really great healing, emotional healing, betterment of your soul and spirit. Again, the Jupiter's not just, the lower mind and rationally just looking through your dreams and all that. It's really deep, meaningful information there. So I would be looking at your dreams on Friday night. Now, Saturday, check this out. The moon's right on that rave mandala hexagram number 26. Well, in the rave, it's called the gate 26, gate of constriction, I believe. Anyway, I don't know. I can't remember. But anyway, the moon's also making a square over to Mars and a trine up to, no, it's the other way around. Trine over to Mars and a square up to Neptune. The square up to Neptune is going to kind of produce some illusion, if you will. And so it's really important that you get all your information into long-term memory, analyzed, so that you're not having to analyze with Neptune at play. A square over to Neptune might give you some tricks and some insights that aren't really true. It's very creative, and I don't want to badmouth Neptune, because Neptune is really good for giving you some great insights. mysticism and all that, but it may be fake. And especially now, I want to get that into all the learning. This is going to be some big learning because, well, let me just get through this and I can tell you why. Last day, Sunday, emotions clue us into possible changes and insights because of a trine over to Uranus. Uranus makes it easy to help us see that we are unique beings in our emotions, but also helps us through changing our emotional states or our responses to the world, or changing the world so that our emotions change. How bizarre. All right, now let's get out of the focus. Now, I talked about the gate 26. That was the original hexagram. As you can see here, I put the change in, and so now we have the mountain on top of the higher trigram, and the lower trigram is the lake now. And the lake tends to pool up by the mountain, and it nourishes the mountain, but it's also diminishing it because it's kind of soaking it all in. And we try to start to forget that this water kind of ebbs and flows. It doesn't just stay there high all the time. So this is the hexagram 41 diminishing. Now, before I go on, before I explain this, I'm going to read out of the Book of Changes. This is the solution. So I just talked to you about the influence, and the influences basically are offering you opportunities for deeper wisdom. This decrease is very important from an emotional and mental state, and it's called decrease in the Book of Changes, the limitation of resources which maximize development of potential. So now this is kind of counter the influence, because Leo wants more. Leo wants to get out there more, but in this case, it's about the resources which may be drying up. And that's okay, because it's kind of like the caterpillar, which kind of contracts first before it makes its move forward. So this is kind of where we are. The solution is to consolidate your power, especially the wisdom that you received before, so that when we're ready to go, probably next week, we're going to be ready. Okay. By this decrease of the lower powers of the psyche, the higher aspects of the soul are enriched. What does that sound like? The higher aspects of the soul are definitely Jupiter and Sagittarius. The decrease of the lower powers of the psyche, that's the Mercury influence. So let me read a little bit more about 41 from the Book of Changes. At the foot of the mountains, the lake, the image of decrease. Thus, the superior man controls his anger and restrains his instincts. The Book of Changes talks about decreasing in terms of emotional response. Okay, so even though other places have found it to be like material resources, we are talking about, in the Book of Changes, about emotions. The lake at the foot of the mountain evaporates. In this way, decreases to the benefit of the mountain, which is enriched by its moisture. The mountain stands as the symbol of a stubborn strength that can harden into anger. The lake is the symbol of unchecked gaiety that can develop into passionate drives at the expense of the life forces. Therefore, decrease is necessary. Anger must be decreased by keeping still. The instincts must be curbed by restriction. Okay, so I want to do a couple things here in my offering of insights. This is a careful thing to do, because emotions can be hazardous if you start to just try to control them. Emotions aren't bad. It's generally our reaction to the emotion. So getting angry is not a negative thing. We are taught that you're not allowed to be angry, or some of us are, and therefore we just repress it. But repressing anger can give you like severe body pain later in life. It can make you, your muscles be contracting chronically, which it can be hazardous to your health. And so many players in psychology and even medical field have determined that this is a bad way to handle anger. So the anger is not a bad thing. It's the repression that can be disastrous. So what's the alternative? To slam the door or yell at people or punch people in the face? No, the anger doesn't punch people in the face. The reaction to the emotion punches people in the face. So the anger itself should be living inside. You should be aware that the anger is there without having to do anything about it. A lot of people would say that the slamming of the door or the punching the other person in the face is actually a resistance of not allowing that anger to be inside of me. And so I have to get it out. And, if I feel like I want to be hitting things and yelling, I have to get this anger out of me. That's why people yell or scream into their pillow or scream at other people. It's because they can't stand that feeling of anger inside of them. So in this case, I'm going to introduce the word diffusion, which I'm going to show in the later slide. Diffusion is a concept in acceptance and commitment therapy, where you're allowed to see the emotion in you without doing anything about it, without resisting it. It's not going to kill you to allow that anger to be there. It doesn't make you a lesser person. You're you, and the anger is something else. It's an energy that's running through you. And so diffusion allows you to just see it, open your space to it, and wait for the anger to start going away, but not pushing it away, not pushing it down. Okay, so yeah, I like the constriction and the decrease and the diminishing and these ideas from the I-Ching, but we got to be careful on how we work with emotions. We need to be aware that the emotion is there instead of pushing it down. So getting into further solutions, this is going out to the National Dream Center tomorrow. It's the wisdom within, and we have an opportunity to tame your inner power by maximizing the various Jupiter aspects this week. It's going to take a lot of mindfulness in order to recognize that your emotions are there and not have to do anything about them, not reacting, especially impulsively, off of your emotions. Then this one's going out to intervention tomorrow. The influences, the Jupiter aspects, and the planets in Leo. The solution is to diffuse from your emotions. That's what we just talked about. So not distancing from your emotions, not ignoring your emotions, but being fully aware that they're there, opening your space to them, but then restraining on any emotional reactivity. Don't react on your emotions, but deep reflecting. Why is this emotion here? And then remembering that compassion breeds power. Compassion breeds power, and that's important because these arguably are the main influences here in this whole week. The Sun and Venus together, they're in Leo tropical, but in Sidereal, they're in Cancer. And Cancer is all about nurturing. Do you remember the original hexagram? This was about the maximization of the power of memory applied to the nurturing of continuity. Nurturing. Cancer is nurturing. And so we do need to be nurturing our ego, nurturing our relationships, nurturing the deeper wisdom that those two gates are going to open up to Jupiter. The other thing, obviously, is a lot of not just mindfulness throughout the day, but accessing dreams, doing your spiritual work this week. This is all about contracting, not just from the resource standpoint, but especially through emotional reactivity. This moon is going to be whipping around, giving you all sorts of different emotional challenges, I guess, if you will. Are you going to be reacting off of those emotions, Or are you going to be diffused from them, but fully aware that they are there, not pushing them away, not pushing them down, and getting the deeper wisdom in them? All right. So I don't know exactly what the following week looks like. I haven't gotten that far, but we are poised to be accelerating forward when that energy returns to yang. And this week is about kind of stepping back. Sure, you can be the Leo and be out in public and getting your public support, but it's about going within, getting your wisdom, and waiting for the next step forward. All right. I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for your shares and likes and comments. I really am appreciating the support that we are getting. And I want everyone to have a great week. We'll see you hopefully sometime this week, but if not, we'll see you again next Sunday. Thanks, everybody.